On behalf of the South Dakota Rock and Roll Music Association, John, Brian, and myself, I just want to thank you for having us.
In order to talk about rock and roll in South Dakota, you kind of have to go back to like 1953, 54, Alan Freed, hearing a song that was from the Blackboard Jungle. You guys know what that song was? Just yell it out. You ready?
Sure.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, rock. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, rock. We're gonna rock round the clock tonight. Put your glad rags on, join me, hon. Have some fun when the clock strikes 1. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. We're gonna rock, rock, rock to broad daylight. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. When the clock strikes 2, 3, and 4, band slows down, we yell for more. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. We're gonna rock, rock, rock till the broad daylight. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. Go, Brian! Clock strikes 12, we'll cool off then. Start rocking around the clock again. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. We're gonna rock, rock, rock till the broad daylight. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. Woo! There you go. So we're going to do kind of abbreviated. In the songs that we do, we won't do a lot of that, but we thought we'd put you in the spirit of listening to rock and roll for the first time. How many musicians are out here? Call yourself musicians, okay? How many of you have been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in South Dakota? Yeah, Dave? Dave with Wonder Band? Bill Hoffman with, what's the name of that band? Mogen's Heroes. Yeah, I know that. So we're not here to promote our own bands, but it's just helped us tell the story. But the king of rock and roll in South Dakota is the guy you're seeing right up there. He's Myron Lee Wackendorf. And I wasn't sure if we're going to have a picture. I asked him if he could come tonight. He said, John, I'd love to be there, but I scheduled a colonoscopy for today. So here's his statue. Here's his cardboard cutoff. But Myron was an amazing guy. He started out playing accordion, playing organ, and he was he went to Washington High School down the street here, and some of his classmates in the late 50s, they worked at the Minnehaha Country Club. So when they started their band, that's why they were caddies, Myron Lee and the Caddies. Famous booking agent, he's from Laverne, and he got a hold of Myron, and he made Myron a lot of money, and Myron made Jimmy Thomas a lot of money. They're both really good at what they're doing. I know you're going to jump in on it with something with Myron, aren't you? If you do.
I will. I'll just stump
because
right
I don't want to be talking too much.
Right.
Okay. Well, kind of a funny story, and it's kind of a cool connection, because Myron and I have gotten to be friends over the years. When I started my band, I went to Myron and I said, what do you use for a contract? And he brought out some of his old contracts from when he was traveling with Dick Clark and with Bobby V and with Buddy Knox, and traveling all over the United States and traveling up in Canada. And I had seen him in Waubay, my hometown, and I was probably a freshman, sophomore in high school, and I said, I heard him sing this song. It was by Sonny James. And later on, when I talked to Myron, he said when he was in high school, he saw Sonny James play this at the Arcota Ballroom. Arcota was inducted in the first round in 2009. Who do you think it is? the touch of your embrace tells me no one can take your place. In my heart, young love, first love, filled with true devotion. Young love, our love, we share with deep emotion. The Flying Fingers of Brian Wheeler. Keep going, Brian. Go through the chorus. You guys sing the echo, okay? Young love, first love, filled with true devotion. Young love, our love, we share with deep emotion. I'm not trying to compare myself, thank you. I'm not trying to compare myself to Myron Lee because he had a tremendous career, but we just had that thing in common. Go ahead. Oh man, okay. Are we jumping to the mob? We can do that. Okay. So there's no way that we can touch all the bands. We've inducted like 105 bands or something like over the years, many different individual people, but we also always got somebody from out of state. Bobby V was from the first year. The Mob was from 2011, and that was probably as much fun as anybody could have. I got to play organ with them, and Big Al, Jim Hovey, Jimmy Ford. But the Mob used to come here to the Macamba Club. That's another place that we're going to tell you about a little bit. But they came to the Macamba Club, and they'd book like 7 nights in a row, and it was packed every night. And they hadn't played for like 35 years. They came back in 2011, and it was about as much fun as you could have. It was really, really good. How many of you seen the Mob? Yeah. You never forget them. They had so much energy, and Jim Hovey was kind of the writer. He wrote I'll tell you a quick story. When he was on the Dick Clark tour too, as like a high school senior. He was so good, and he was writing the song, and we got back from the tour, and he was going to this music school, and he had a guy that was starting a band called the Buckinghams. And he said, "Do you got any songs that you might want to try?" And so he gets out his guitar, and then there's like a reel-to-reel tape, and he plays this song for him and gives it to him. Didn't think anything of him. Like 7 months later, he's listening to the radio. The #1 song in the country was "Kind of a Drag." That's a pretty cool story. So let's go on to somebody else. So it's your job to like cut us off if we're talking too much, okay? Who knows who that guy is? Yeah, attaboy, Bill, you better. Okay, that's Rod Jerky. Rod's originally from Parkston. He like Myron, started playing accordion. But there weren't, rock bands didn't have too much accordion. So he came over here, and I'm going to read the list of some of the bands. He's been inducted like 9 times. He and Scott Clavercamp are pretty close to the same. The Pilgrims, Handyman, or the Handy Brothers group. He also received a Lifetime Achievement. Scotty Lee and the Stingrays, Priceless, Power Play. Those are some of the groups. Plus, this year, Hot Rod, Chevy Chevy. So if you've never heard of any of those bands, you must have been living under a rock someplace. But I always loved the fact that he has made his living from playing music. He, not that many people do that in South Dakota, do they? Do they, Dave Wood? No. I mean, it's a sideline for us, so. Okay. Anybody recognize this band? That's Indigenous. And the guy in the middle is Mato. Mato is the leader of the band, and they started in like 1996. Their dad had taught them. His name is, I'm going to find it here. His dad, Greg, taught all of his brothers how to play. And so his last name is Nanji Pate, and their sister Wamdi. They have a cousin, Horse. Greg Zephyr is their dad. Taught them all how to play. B.B. King loved Indigenous, and he wanted to tour with them, which is a pretty cool story, too. Their first album was in 1998, and Mato has been carrying the name after 2006. Last year, he was at the Levitt, and he ended up, I went backstage, and instead of the other folks, instead of his brothers and sisters, he had two of his sons in his band. So, and they packed the Levitt. It was really fun. So, go, Brian.
Oh, okay. Lyle's Music, Lake Preston, South Dakota. The guy ran a little music store right out of his garage. And he'd always, I remember, I grew up in Huron, okay? So this guy would always come to Huron for the fair. And he would bring a bunch of really cool guitars and amplifiers. And that's pretty much what he dealt with, no percussion really per se. But he had this booth at the appliance building. If you have ever been to the state fair, there's a building called the Appliance Building. Well, he's in there, and I'm just a little punk. I go in there, and I'm about 12 years old, right? And I wanted to play a guitar. And he said, well, I happen to have a few of them here. So he showed me a few of them, and I said, I don't really like any of those. So he said, I'll tell you what, when after the fair, I'll go home, and I got a couple of guitars at home. Give me your address. I'm 11 years old, okay? Give me your address, and I'll bring the guitars over to you, and we'll figure out which one you like the best. So he did, and one day he just shows up at my door, and he brings these guitars in, and my mom, who is totally conservative, what's he doing here, and why is he bringing guitars? And my dad, who is a jazz organist, encouraged all of us boys. Okay, I'll digress for a minute. There's 5 boys in my family. 3 out of the 5 were musicians. My dad loved that deal, So when this guy shows up with the guitar, right, my dad goes, oh, mother, just let the boy alone. He doesn't really have anybody to do this with, so just let him alone, So, but here comes Lyle with his guitar. He pulls out what was a 1964 Fender Stratocaster guitar. And I don't know if you guys even know what a Fender Stratocaster guitar is, but it was 1964 guitar. And I bought that thing from him with my paper route money, okay?
Wow.
$225. It's all the money I had in the world. My mom flipped out. And my dad said, just leave it alone, it'll be fine.
And you haven't quit buying guitars since,
I haven't quit buying guitars since, and now I have a very lovely wife that says, what are you doing? But I'll tell you an interesting thing. The thing about the 64 Stratocaster is that if I'd have kept that guitar, bought it for $225, if I'd have kept that guitar today, it's worth $24,000, if you could find one. But I traded it off because I could never get the thing to stay in tune. So anyway, but that's with Lyle. And Lyle's had this huge thing over in his garage, like I said, in Lake Preston. It was great. It was a lot of fun.
All right. Anybody recognize this band? 1978. I'd come off the road with ups and downs, started teaching in Lenox. I got tired of eating restaurant food and staying in motels. And somebody asked me to put a band together for a Halloween thing. So within a few years, that current, what you're seeing up there, the guy on the left is Doug Lund. If you can pray for Doug, Doug's health is not the greatest. He has a really hard time getting around, but his mind is just sharp. and he kind of misses being on the air. And he just actually retired from being the Kello voice, doing all announcements and stuff like that. And I want to thank Mike for being willing to put that picture up there, because he works for the competitors. But the guy on the right, his name is Denny Gale. And Denny's originally from Wagner, South Dakota. And he is an amazing guitar player. And I think this is 26 years. Bill Huffman, I'm going to ask you to come up here. And we haven't practiced this, but it's a song we do. So come on right now. So we've played, like for 45 years, we probably played in 128 or 29 different places in South Dakota. Plus we played in Kansas City, Minneapolis, Des Moines. We haven't traveled as much, but we're kind of getting so that we, I don't know, we're kind of liking each other, and we're kind of at a point where if we don't book a whole bunch of jobs, it's okay. Well, we got inducted in 2018. There's your mic.
Oh yeah, tell you something I think you'll understand when I say that something. I wanna hold your hand. I wanna hold your hand. I wanna hold your hand. And please say to me, you'll let me be your man. And please say to me, you'll let me hold your hand. I wanna hold your hand. I wanna hold your hand. And when I touch you, I'm happy inside.
It's weird not to play drums.
It's such a feeling that my love I can't hide, I can't hide, I can't hide. Oh yeah, now it's something I think you'll understand when I say that something. I wanna hold your hand. I wanna hold your hand. I wanna hold your hand. I wanna hold your hand.
That's Bill Huffman.
That was fun.
I know. What date did that take you back to? What did you think about? February of 1964? Really big shoe? I think, how many of you actually watched that show? Pretty much 95% of the time that are old enough. So, all right. So we kind of covered Myron. We had 2 pictures of Myron, so his band was incredible. You want to talk about the Macamba Club?
Macamba Club. How many people remember the Macamba Club? Oh my gosh. It was the place in the region for live entertainment, and any band you wanted to see was playing at the Macamba. There's a guy named Bud Brown who ran that place, and he ran it with an iron fist. The interesting thing was, I've played a Macamba Club several times, and I've talked to bandmates of mine and band friends of mine who played there several times. Nobody's ever met this Bud Brown guy. We had no idea what he looked like, but all we knew was he didn't mess around with his bands. If you didn't conform to his rules, you were out. Well, we never knew who this guy was. We had these visions of this mafioso dude, sitting back in the back of the bar, smoking cigars and having his gin and tonic, Never knew who the guy was.
I got to meet Bud and got to be friends with him when I was at college.
Oh, wow.
And Bud booked Buddy Rich. He booked Count Basie. He booked Woody Herman.
He booked Chase.
What's that?
Chase came in and played with him.
Yeah, he brought top-notch entertainment. And one of the cool things about Bud is he didn't want things to be too loud. And so he had Ted Hartenhoff was one of the managers that he had. And he had what do you call the machine where you find out how many decibels.
Oh, yeah, the dB meter.
Okay.
This guy named Ted was his right-hand man. He'd send Ted out into the audience with his dB meter, and if you were over a certain threshold, they would actually physically go up to the soundboard and turn you down.
Off, pretty much, yeah.
Pretty much off. They had a lousy sound system to begin with, I remember that. But I remember the story that I had about that is that when I was playing there, the mixer, there was if you guys have ever been in there, the ones have been in there, there's a staircase that goes up on the side of the stage area. And that's where you'd walk up onto the stage. And this mixer was mounted in the wall next to this staircase. I remember going up there and taking my finger and running it across all the volume controls and throttling them up to 10 every time. Every time, you know. And but yeah, this Ted dude was with this dB meter running around. And yeah, but the thing about it was with the Macamba Club was that it was like the crown jewel of gigs to play. If you were good enough to get into the Macamba Club, oh my gosh, it was wild. It was a thrill of a lifetime because he just didn't book any band in there. You had to be pretty good. So we had a good one.
Okay. How many of you guys know Scott Clavercamp? Scott was the drummer in Mogen's Heroes from early 80s till like 88 until Doug Lund took over. But Scotty played, and he's been inducted either 8 or 9 times. He and Rod kind of have this thing going where who's got the most plaques. But we had to replace all the plaques except the Mogen's Heroes one for Scott because he built a place out near Lane, South Dakota. Anybody go to dances in Lane? Rainbow Ballroom, okay? Well, he has a place out by the lake. What's that? Yeah.
Snoop Gibson, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, anyway, Scott built a house. He's a really good carpenter. Built a house the same time that the tornadoes came through and kind of messed up Pizza Ranch, and there was a storm out at his place. Lightning came down his chimney, and it got the gas, and his place was gone. It was burned within 5 minutes. That didn't stop him a bit. He rebuilt it, and he lived there. It took him like a year to rebuild it, and he lived in his shop and took baths in a bathtub, and unbelievable. But Scotty Clavercamp was just a really, really good drummer. Okay, in the first year, Gene Carroll and the Shades, Gene's real name was Gene Oakland, and he was from Sisseton, up in northeast South Dakota. Anybody know what he got known for after his singing? Wrestling, exactly right. He was like the primo wrestling announcer, and they got inducted. He has passed away about 3-4 years ago, but he's just a character. And their band, it was the cream of the crop. I remember them coming to the Blue Dog. So they started out as the Harold Johnson Orchestra, and they thought, man, we got to start rock and roll. So they did that. And they wore sunglasses to their jobs. That's why they went by the Shades. But that was kind of a hindrance when there was low light, because they couldn't. Nobody could see the band. Well, I don't know. So they couldn't see the girls. I think that's what kept them. So, anybody recognize this guy? If he was wearing a cowboy hat and singing country songs, he's originally from Hazel, South Dakota. You know him? Sherwin Linton. Okay, and when he started, Sherwin's just a gentleman. We see him at State Fair all the time. He has us come and sing with him. His first band was a rockabilly band. It's called the Rocketeers, 1955, KWAT radio station, and that's still going in Watertown. When he was 16, he started the band, and his band came down here and played in a shop or a bar called the Diddy Bop. Does anybody remember the Diddy Bop? I couldn't find anybody that did it, but I know that's true. Then he started the band and moved to Minneapolis called the Fender Benders. And now his band is called the Cotton Kings. So he and his Pam, I think he just turned 84. And he still plays amazingly well. His hearing is not very good, so he doesn't sing as much as he used to, but he's an incredible guy, really strong Christian guy, and he loves Sherwin-Linton. He was inducted the first year. Okay, Bobby V. Where is he from? Fargo. And what was the significant event in his career? 1959, February 3rd. Remember the day the music died? Yeah, Mason City, Iowa. So Richie Valens, help me, Big Bopper, oh baby, Bill sings that really great too, and Buddy Holly, and so they were killed in a tragic plane accident. The next night, the people that took the bus up there in a freezing bus, they got Bobby V's band to play. And he was like 15 years old, and everybody loved his band. He was inducted the very first year, and I got to be friends with him then, but some of his songs, Devil or Angel, The Night Has 1,000 Eyes, the only song that he ever recorded that went to number 1 was Take Good Care of My Baby, and it was written by Carole King. So he was, like I said, he was inducted in 2009. Funny story about that, his sons were all playing with him. So his son Jeff was a drummer, his son Tommy's a bass player, and his son Robbie also played. And there's been kind of a split in that family since Bobby passed away. I got to go to his visitation up there, just kind of representing the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and his family's just great. But Tommy remembered, they came down from Fargo with Bobby, or with Tommy's string bass on top of the station wagon. And so I helped him tie that down. You know, I mean, it was a nice bass. And if you ever seen the band doing, they're just incredible musicians. So, the Trippers. Anybody know anybody from the Trippers? Does anybody ever go to Lewis Drug? Okay. Saxophone player, organ player, Mark Griffin was in the Trippers. And they practiced like every day. And Ken Mills, who was a very well-known booking agent around this area, he picked up the Trippers, and they always dressed in blue tuxedos. And like I said, their practicing got them a long ways. They played for like 5 years.
Is Mark the guy way on the right on that photo?
That what?
Is that Mark Griffin?
Right in
Lewis?
the middle.
In the middle?
Yep. Yeah.
Oh, right there. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Another important facet of the South Dakota Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is people that help support us. And Mark Griffin is very generous with our organization. So we pat him on the back. He was probably down in Florida right now. He has a place down in Florida. But okay, something new. I probably should feel guilty because my sister was in this band for about 30 years, Helen Mogen. But John McCormick, Mark Kimmel started this band in 1976, 2 years before we got started. So it's kind of a challenge. We got to keep going for at least 2 more years so we can at least tie them, Bill, okay? Anybody know where Something New is from? Salem. And it's always been a good band. John's been kind of the music director, John McCormick, McCormick Motors. That was his family's car dealership. And they've opened for a lot of really good acts. And so Something New just retired, and they had like 1,500 people over in Hartford just at the end of the summer. It was like a farewell concert. So really good band. Anybody recognize this guy? I think there are 2 pictures of him. His name is Buddy Miles. Okay? Buddy was born in Omaha, but moved up here to live with some relatives. And as the story goes, he was going to Axtell Park, and he always had drumsticks with him. And so he would go play on the radiators at the school, which drove the teachers nuts. but he wanted to be in a band so badly, and he got in trouble with Earl Britt's son. They got caught breaking into a vending machine, and as it's often done, I'm not getting political or racial or anything, but Buddy was an African American kid. Earl Britt's son was white, and the white kid got off. They wanted to send Buddy to Plankinton, and somebody intervened, and they just sent him to Boys Town down in Omaha. And there was a counselor in Omaha that knew Buddy was a really good drummer. Took him to see Wilson Pickett. 6, 3, 4, 5, 7. You know him. Anyway, so he was at this. It was just a bar that he was at with the counselor, and he asked Wilson Pickett, "Can I go play during the break?" And he did. And Wilson Pickett came up to Buddy, and he was maybe 15 at the time. He said, "When you get out of Boys Town, you're my drummer." And that's what happened. Does anybody know who he ended up drumming with? It's a left-handed guitar player named Jimi Hendrix. So, I mean, he was like probably the most famous South Dakota kid, I don't know. And kind of a sidelight was, he is the guy that did the voices for the California Raisins. Heard it through the grapevine. Bill, your question, or?
I was just going to say that I looked him up. I know him only because you had mentioned him once, and I just looked him up on Spotify. And to this day, he gets 131,000 listeners a month to his music.
Yeah.
So he's a big deal.
Them changes. Is that how that goes?
Yep.
Okay. Anyway, when he was on his deathbed down in Texas, and his daughter told me this when we were inducting him as a spirit of the music, and she said, when my dad was in the hospital, Eric Clapton was doing a concert in New York City, and he stopped the concert and sang a song, and we had everybody cheer for Buddy Miles. That's pretty cool. Eric Clapton, one of the very best guitar players ever. So it's fun to remember all these stories and talking to these folks. That was my biggest thrill about being the president. Huh? Yeah. They called him on the phone. Yeah. Okay. You know this next one, Mike.
Everybody know this, gentlemen? Corey Van Sickle. That's right, Corey and the Fireflies. Corey's, Rapid City boy, done incredibly well in the music scene. How many albums does he have out?
I think it was 6.
6 albums.
Yeah.
I think the first one was 99. He had another 2006, 2007. Corey is on the board of the South Dakota Rock and Roll Music Association, and this year went in as the Corey and the Fireflies were inducted into the Hall of Fame. Very well deserved. I think the last person on here now that we have, does everybody know, or does anybody know who this is?
You are right.
100%. Yep, young lady. Her stage name is Rowan Grace, and you knew the name of where the Grace came from.
Right. Well, Rock Grace, who was a friend of Brian's from Huron, he and his wife Deb their granddaughter is Rowan's best friend, and so that's why she took the Grace part. Because we'll get to Rock Grace pretty soon. So keep going.
All right. But 3 years ago, at the Battle of the Bands, at our annual induction ceremony, Rowan's band, I remember the name of the band.
That was just called Rowan Grace.
Rowan Grace, yes.
Rowan Grace band.
Rowan Grace came out, and incredible 4-piece band at the time. So again, she was on last year, and I think she was 17 when she was on. So she was 15 when she was singing with this band, and just blew. It was crazy. And then, as you mentioned, 2 years later, she's one of the finalists on The Voice, which is awesome. And that young lady, she's very involved in theater and sticking in music. So that, yes, she did perform at the Levitt last summer, I think. Yeah. So I think, that's everybody we have on picture.
Okay. Well, we got we do want to talk about the KOMA bands, and they're from Mid-Continent Broadcasting. A guy named John Brown owned Mid-Continent, and he would hire bands to tour in South Dakota. So it wasn't just South Dakota bands that have gotten inducted, but probably the top band would be the Flippers. Tell us about the Flippers.
I was almost a flipper.
Yeah.
I was almost a flipper. You don't know that, do you? Yeah, I got real quick, I was in college and I got a call senior year, right in the middle of midterm exams. I got a call from the bass player of the Flippers. He goes, hey, our guitar player's leaving the band. I told him about you. Do you want to come down and play? It pays $125 a week. I'm going, are you nuts? You know? So my claim to fame, that's as far as I got with the Flippers. The Flippers were
Danny Hine.
with Denny Hine, they were one of the premier bands to come out of Mid-Continent Entertainment, out of Lawrence, Kansas. Those guys, I know they had one album for sure. They had a song called the Harlem Shuffle, and that's what got them on network television, was that song. And those bands like the Flippers and the Red Dogs and the Rising Suns, and there's a band called the Blue Things, which were just unbelievable. All those bands, they really carved a niche for everybody else to follow. And yeah, we've inducted all of those bands that have come out of that Mid-Continent era down there.
Young Raiders.
Young Raiders.
Oh, who else did you not? I mean,
Spider and the Crabs.
Spider and the Crabs. They just got inducted this year, 2 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, how many of you guys listen to KOMA radio? 15, 20, Oklahoma City. So huh? Yeah. Do you guys remember the kissing tone? Oh gosh. That was always fun when you were with your brother in the back seat, you know, so I'm just kidding. So the Blue Dog Inn, we don't have a picture of that, but being a Waubee kid, I started selling beer when I was barely old enough, maybe not quite old enough, but they sold beer for $1.25 a six-pack. And I loved it when either the Flippers or any of the KOMA bands, they cost more, and so they would charge a little more, like maybe $2 instead of $1. So, but I mean, it was fun watching those bands. John Brown's been inducted too, and he comes along with all the bands when they get inducted. So, who else did we forget on that list? Aren't you going to talk about your band?
My what?
Your band?
My band?
Yeah.
My band.
Do you remember?
No.
It was like, it had a reference to like marijuana in it. Well, maybe.
Nickel Bag of Soul.
Nickel Bag of Soul,
Nickel
yes.
Bag of Soul, yeah. Nickel Bag of Soul was a seven-piece band in the fashion of Chicago. Actually, we did a lot of Chicago stuff, so it was that kind of a band. It was a horn band. Jimmy Thomas, the booking agent, booked us, and I will just, we talked about Jimmy earlier. The thing I remember about meeting Jimmy Thomas is he's got this, he's like bigger than life almost, because his name was huge because he booked so many different bands around. But you didn't mess around with Jimmy Thomas. If you didn't play the kind of music that got people on the dance floor, he didn't book you. And if you didn't pay your fee back to him within about a week or 10 days, he wouldn't book you. And so I was fortunate enough to play in a couple of bands, Nickel Bag of Soul being one of them, and a band called The Apostles being another one. Jimmy booked both those bands, and we were busy all the time. And I got to ask you, we talked about the Macamba Club here. There are so many old ballrooms that don't exist anymore, the Valhalla Ballroom in Lake Chetek.
Japanese ballroom.
Japanese ballrooms, the Hollyhock Ballroom in Hatfield, Minnesota, whose dance floor was built on rubber tires, if you can believe it.
I'm going to interrupt you a second because you talked about Hollyhock.
Yeah.
Avis Hamlin was a teenager, and her mom and dad owned the Hollyhock in Hatfield, just east of Pipestone, and we inducted them because so many South Dakota kids would go there. They had this new band from California. It was called, and they had one song out. It's called Surfin'. You know what the band was? Beach Boys, and it was pretty full. after the first break, and Avis told me the story about being out talking to the guys, and they were Brian Wilson and her brother, his brothers. They were out smoking, and they looked down the road, down the highway, and there were cars as far as you could see. And Brian turns to Carl and he goes, "We must be pretty good." They were pretty good, and they're still going. Actually, go ahead and keep
Anyway, I was
talking
just going
about-
to say, yeah, I'm sure you've all remembered all the ballrooms that were around, and that was an era of days gone by. But you had like Groveland Park, you had Rest Haven, you had the Hollyhock, you had the Showboat Ballroom up in Lake Benton, Minnesota, which was owned by Jimmy Thomas, by the way, the booking agent. But it's kind of sad because we don't have that now. You know, those were hot times for the bands to come, and all the bands came through here, not just from South Dakota, but Minnesota, North Dakota, Iowa. Mid-continent bands out of Kansas would come through here. It was an unbelievable time, and this was all during the 60s, through about the mid-70s, late 70s, and then all of a sudden it all faded away. It's kind of sad, actually, but life goes on.
Tell us about that Huron girl that we inducted.
Okay. My wife is out here, so she has firsthand experience dealing with Cheryl Stoppelmore. You know her as Cheryl Ladd from Charlie's Angels. Went to high school with her. My wife was out here, sang in concert choir with her. And she was a killer singer, and she was not too hard to not look at too, so, but Cheryl Stoppelmore was her maiden name. Married a guy named Alan Ladd, went out to LA from Huron, ended up in LA, did the voiceover for a cartoon called Josie and the Pussycats, which was on Saturday morning. That's how she got her start. And then Alan Ladd discovered her, and the rest is history, and yeah, it was incredible.
And she was a really good singer.
Yeah, good singer. Yeah, she was with a band. You know this guy, Doug Allman?
Doug Allman, yeah.
Doug Allman. That's who she went to California with. Doug Allman was a keyboard player, right?
Right.
From Huron, and they all packed it up and went out to California, and they were set.
Yep.
And now she's
We didn't mention Mark Cranny. Mark Cranny is a drummer. Grew up in Sioux Falls. Played with many bands around here. A band called Rushmore, the Vandals with Dan Donahoe, and Zero Ted, Chateau. In '76, he moved to L.A. I don't think he followed Cheryl Ladd, but
I don't think he did, no.
But he lived just kind of down the street from us, and we'd been friends for quite a while. So out there, he played with Tommy Bolin, Gino Vanelli, Tower of Power, Jethro Tull. I mean, all really, really good bands. And it's kind of a funny story because our band was going out to play like a wedding dance in Parkston. That was the first place I taught. And Mark happened to be in town. I needed the drummer. Mark, you want to play? Sure. So he takes a hi-hat and he takes a low tom, didn't take a bass drum at all, and just a hi-hat and a tom and a snare. He gets in, and he and Tom Stever and I were driving in, and he had just come back from recording an album called A with Jethro Tull. They lived in England. And Mark goes, "Hey John, how much you paying me for this job?" And I said, $85. This is like 1980 or something. "Is that all right?" He goes, "Yeah, I just got an advance on the A album." "Well, how much was that?" $50,000. So it's pretty fun to say that he was just incredible guy. Died from diabetes. Probably the best drummer ever to come out of South Dakota. He was really good friends with Mike Miller. Mike Miller is a guitar player. You guys remember Curly Miller? Any of you guys? Okay, Curly had Dave, Terry, Mike, and they were all good musicians. And Mike's played with Tower of Power. Who else did he play for?
Me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I played with Mike.
Were you in a band with him?
Yep, I was in the Apostles with Mike. Mike,
Yeah.
Mike Miller and his brother Terry. Mike Miller was he was the greatest guy you'd ever want to know. His personality, I mean, he was like a guitar god. He is a guitar god. I mean,
Yeah.
geez, he plays with Boss Skaggs, you know, Bette
Yeah.
Midler, you know. I mean, that's the kind of crowd he runs with now. But when he and I were playing together, I remember going over to his house, sitting down in his basement. He'd say, "Pick up a guitar. I'm going to show you something." And he'd make me do these same things that he was doing. I still can't do them, but I tell you, the guy was just, he was like I said, a guitar god. But yet he was so humble that if you needed help with something, he'd say, "Here, come here. I'll show you how to do that." You know, that was really cool about Mike.
Yeah. That might cover it, except Wakefield. You want to talk about Wakefield? No. Okay. Wakefield got inducted 5 years ago, maybe. Jeff Gunderson, Evan Jones, Dave Huron, and Jeff Kohler. And they went to Washington High School together, and in junior high, they started playing. And they just played full time for, 7, 8 years? Yeah. Jeff is an incredible guitar player. And these are all really good people, too. Jeff is also on the board, but we wanted to mention Wakefield. I wish we could. Go ahead.
Wakefield story. So right across the river from Yankton is a bar called the Lazy D. I don't know if anybody's ever been there or seen it. Wakefield played there, and I was probably 15 years old. And Wakefield played outside there, and it had a big wooden fence around it. I was underage, I couldn't get in. And so I'm there with my buddies. We're sort of hanging out in the parking lot. We may have had a beer or two at 15, but you could still hear all the music. And anyway, I see my sister walk in. She's 5 years older than me. Uh-oh. And so she walks into the bar and goes in and has a great time. Didn't think much about it. Next morning, we're talking at the house, and she starts talking about, "Oh, we were doing something else." It's like, well, wait a minute. No, you weren't. So anyway, fast forward, and I've always loved Wakefield, and I think it was like the second board meeting we're at, and all of a sudden Jeff's sitting there, and I put one and one together, and I was like a starstruck kid that I was sitting next to the guitar player from Wakefield. So
Yeah.
and it is cool now. It's the second age. Like, "Hey, Jeff, how you doing?" So
And I wish we could go through every band that got inducted, but we don't have until 11 o'clock. You guys, but
But I don't want to jump the gun on this, John. But we
Yeah.
covered a lot of bands and a lot of people. But we brought some programs from previous Hall of Fame inductions, and they're over here. And you're welcome to grab one if you want it. You can also hear a lot of these same stories we told you, but a lot more. You'll find out a lot more about a lot of different musicians. The other thing I wanted to draw attention to is we have a display at the Washington Pavilion, and up there's an interactive screen up there that you can go and punch up the band that you're interested in or the musician you're interested in, and you'll be able to see all of the historical pictures and comments that were made and their history and everything else on there. So we tried to cover it all, but you can't when you've got so many bands coming in and out. And the other thing I'll say to you is that how many years ago did we start the Battle of the Bands for the young kids?
is this the fourth year now?
Yeah, fourth year. I'll tell you, if you guys have never been to a Hall of Fame event, you need to go just to see these kids get up there and play. You will not believe the kind of talent that is coming out of this state. That little Rowan Grace, which is 15 years old, when I was 15 years old, I didn't know how to tie my shoes, and she's up there just making it happen, and a lot of those bands are like that. So, part of the organization's efforts are to raise up the next generation of players because they're going to end up in the next Hall of Fame.
it's harder. We talked about the ballrooms that don't exist anymore, and they don't. There's not a place for these younger bands, their own Grace type of bands, to go play. So the fact that they're making a difference, they're making a statement is they're doing it. I'm not saying you guys had it easy, but there was more places to play.
Oh yeah, there are way more places.
So they're the future of rock and roll in the state.
Anybody ever heard of a guy named Bobby Keys? Bobby Keys was a really good saxophone player, and he used to play with Buddy Knox. Come along and be in my party, dog, right? Well, Myron Lee was on a tour with Dick Clark, and they were down in Texas. And Buddy Knox heard Myron's band. He said, You guys play a lot? Yeah. So Buddy left, Bobby Keys left Buddy Knox and joined Myron's band. So then they're back in Texas, and there was a band from England that was playing at that same festival, and they didn't really mix with the rest of the bands like those other guys that toured together. And Mick Jagger, so, yeah. They heard Bobby Keys playing with Myron's band, and they stole Bobby Keys for the Rolling Stones. That's a pretty cool story too. So, well, we were prepared, I think. Yeah. We've had a great time talking to you. Thank you so much.
Hey, you guys got a kind of an encore take us out of here song to play?
You know how to do the alligator? You don't know how I feel when I play for the Minnehaha County Historical Society. We've had a great time. Yes, we have. I don't know any rhymes, but I sing. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Oh, it's all right. All right, girl. You're hurting me, 'cause it's all right. It's all right. All right.